This is the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for July 22nd, 2019. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Zachary Urban.
Present.
David Keeter.
Present.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Leah Dozeman.
Here.
Christy Davis.
Here.
George Pond. Present. Janice Hoppy.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Matthews has excused himself for this evening, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Councilors, before you have the in your packet the council minutes of May 13th, 2019, and the study session notes of May 20, 2019, and June 3rd, 2019. Are there any corrections? If not, we will let the minutes stand as presented, and they will stand as presented. Are there any changes that any councilor wishes to make in the agenda, or any item that you wish to take off of the consent agenda? Then the agenda will stay as published. And we will go now to citizens' right to speak. And citizens who wish may speak on any matter not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes. I have a sign-in sheet, and when I read your name, if you would please come to the podium and adjust the microphone so that it's convenient and we may hear you clearly. If you'd give us your first and last name and spell your last name and give us your address. You'll have 3 minutes to speak after that starts. So our first speaker is Jay Harris, and our on-deck speaker is Heather Vanderburg. Is Jay... Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, my name's Jay Harris. I live at 7425 West 34th Avenue. My family and I bought our home in August of 1995. So we've been there for 24 years, and Wheat Ridge has been a great place to raise our family. So it's been a great town. My understanding is there's some issues with short-term rentals. Some citizens or neighbors have been wondering about short-term rentals, and as my kids have grown up and moved out, we have started doing that for the last 4 months, and it's worked out very well. The neighbors don't mind. I've talked to them, so it's worked out very well. And I would just like to be able to use my home as I see fit, as it is my home. I spent 24 years fixing it up, paying taxes. As you know, taxes and insurance have tripled since I've moved in there. And so home ownership in Wheat Ridge and all of Denver has gone up quite a bit. And so to help with defer those costs, I've been doing the short-term rentals and with just Airbnb, and it's worked out very well. And so I would just like to let my house do what I can do with my house as I see fit. And of course, I don't allow parties or anything. It's all very quiet. And so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Heather Vanderburg and Benji Vanderburg on deck.
Good evening. My name is Heather Vanderburg, and my address is 7185 West 48th Avenue. Bear with me, technical difficulties. Can I have 1 moment? Sorry, I'm nervous. I had to write mine out. Okay, so I came this evening to speak about short-term rentals. My husband and I purchased our first home in Wheat Ridge in 2004. We even got married in our beautiful backyard of our cozy cottage. Our family grew out of our home, but we were so in love with it and its location across the street from Stites Park that we made a decision to keep the property. We moved just down the street from our first home because we love the small town community feel that Wheat Ridge offers. After running the property for 6 years, we completely remodeled inside and out and now offer it as a short-term rental to visitors coming to enjoy Colorado. This is such a special opportunity for us to share the love of our home to others. Here's just a few of our reviews from our 100 plus guests. Okay, sorry. I need to work on this more. What a life-changing trip, Heather. We can't express our gratitude for all the love, happiness, and home you've provided us. We're on cloud 9 as we leave, and we'll always have the memory of your beautiful home and the memories made here. Thank you for being such an incredible and accommodating host. We appreciate that more than anything. This one's kind of funny. The best Airbnb we've ever had. Thank you so much for the thought you've put into everything. We both left wanting to live here forever. That one was funny. And then came here to Colorado to spend an early Christmas with family. The location of the suite was perfect as it's a block away from my grandma. It's the best Airbnb we've stayed at by far. Heather and Benji have done such a great job creating the most comfortable place for visitors. We had everything we needed and would definitely stay again. So I hope this information has helped provide you with a glimpse of the types of people who are using our short-term rentals in Wheat Ridge. We look forward to smart regulations that allow us to support our community while providing a home away from home for our guests to stay in our beautiful city of Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Benji Vanderburg and Kenny Burrows on deck.
She was nervous. Hi, my name is Benji Vanderburg. I live at 7185 West 48th Avenue. My wife and I host 2 short-term rentals. One of the things that we like about short-term rentals is that we have a lot more control and are able to better protect our investment by constant monitoring. We have a real presence on our properties. We are usually there a couple times a week, if not more. Another reason we enjoy hosting short-term rentals is the extra money, which provides the ability to fund maintenance, upkeep, and improvements and invest back into the community. I like that we don't have to deal with deferred maintenance items at the end of a lease. If something breaks or is in need of repair, we know about it and it is addressed immediately. Here are a couple of reasons I believe short-term rentals are good for our community. It brings vacationers to our city, which in turn helps support local businesses. People on vacation like to go explore, go out to eat, and spend money. It helps clean up neighborhoods. Short-term rentals need to have very tidy exteriors due to the nature of the business. You don't have the code violations commonly seen with long-term rentals. There are no broke-down junk cars, overgrown grass and weeds, dilapidated structures, etc. It gives people from around the world the opportunity to experience our community. Owning and managing short-term rentals has been an overwhelmingly positive experience for us. We've met a lot of nice people who spend money locally. We have had no property damage, no loud, obnoxious parties. Everyone has been respectful of us and our neighbors. I enjoy working with my family as a team, managing and maintaining our properties. I hope that when the city begins to explore regulations, you will consider us and all the other hardworking hosts in Wheat Ridge.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kenny Burrows and Kevin Barron on deck.
Good evening. My name is Kenny Burrows, and my address is 6695 West 30th Avenue. It's really hard to follow up from all those previous comments, lots of lovely stories about Airbnbs and short-term rentals. I've operated 2 short-term rentals for the past 3 years. My most recent one is at this address on 30th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. Unfortunately, we've met a lot of pushback from the neighbors, and I've tried to mitigate those feelings, that short-term rentals shouldn't exist and it's harmful for our neighborhoods, but my experience has been quite the opposite. I've had my real estate license for 13 years now, and I've managed long-term and short-term rentals. And I've actually had better success as a property manager to maintain the quality of the property. And it does give me the extra funds actually to reinvest in the neighborhood and in my home. Since I purchased my home in Wheat Ridge in October, I spent an additional $40,000 in improvements, which I think then helps property values and the look of the neighborhood as far as quality. I come to you tonight really to speak about regulation. I know that Denver has passed regulations recently, and I think it's been a good thing. My wish is that we have a win-win with neighbors and with short-term rental owners, and that it not be biased in any one direction. I think that there is definitely an opportunity for short-term rental owners to be successful, as well as neighbors to be happy with short-term rentals as neighbors. That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Our next speaker is Kevin Barron and Christine Disney on deck.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Barron. I live at 6695 West 30th Avenue. I come to here also to talk about short-term rentals. My main point that I'd like to make is that the integrity of Airbnb as a whole. We have the ability to limit who we rent to. We are able to confirm that they have provided a government issue ID. They have reviews themselves as well as we are reviewed. So, if something were to happen, they are 100% able to be held liable, as well as never be invited to return to our property. As Kenny has mentioned, that we do run multiple Airbnbs, and we have never had any issues. We have always had very polite and friendly guests that respect the neighborhood and enjoy that it is a quiet and peaceful place to stay. Also, that most of our guests actually, or not most, a good portion of our guests, though, do come from other parts of Colorado to come visit the city, come visit family in the city, as well as majority of our guests are families with younger children. So there's, no, we're not throwing parties. It's a very family-oriented thing. It boils down to we're not a hotel. We're having maybe a family or a small group of guests arrive and they stay more than one night. The only thing that I think that really differentiates is that the length of stay is less than 30 days. So I would absolutely like to say that we would be happy to follow any guidelines or laws that are put into place, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Christine Disney and Julie Clark on deck.
I live at 3940 Balsam Street, and I'm here to speak about short-term rentals from the user standpoint. I recently traveled to Wales and stayed in 3 Airbnbs. My half of the bill for a week was $250. I have stayed in several other Airbnbs when I have traveled to conferences or business meetings. It allows me to travel on a limited budget. I am a preferred visitor. I have a very high rating, and when I search for an Airbnb to stay in, I look for a super host, someone who has a very high rating. The homes are clean, they're well kept. You look for a house in a nice part of town. If I do something wrong, or if I steal something, or if I throw a party, I get kicked out of the system. I lose my rating. So nobody's going to rent to me. So it's a very well-regulated situation. I also think that for someone who is retired, who is living on a limited income, if they have a space in their home, they should be able to rent it out, because it does help defray costs, and it is getting very expensive, as everybody in this room knows, to live in the metro area. And seniors probably don't have as much money to go on as they used to in the past. And as I approach retirement, I live in a very big home for one person. And I am contemplating opening my home up to an Airbnb use. And I think that regulation is warranted, but it's something that isn't a horrible, terrible, awful thing, and it's here to stay.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Clark and Judy Capra on deck.
Julie Clark, 3821 Holland Street. I didn't know Airbnb was the topic tonight, so that's not what I have anything to say about. Except, all of you who do rent, would you please tell people what the speed limit is? I live at the top of Holland, and it seems like some of the guests feel like trying to get from 0 to 40 before they hit 38 is the goal. It's not the goal. What I'm here to talk about is, yes, Julie Clark, simple, easy to spell, is just something to consider as we're talking about development in Wheat Ridge. I've lived here for 33 years, and putting together an urban mobility plan. I have here a map of the electric car charging stations. It goes from Golden to Denver. There are exactly 0 electric car charging stations in Wheat Ridge. The closest one is at Molly's. My husband and I choose no longer to go to Applejack because we can go to Molly's and plug my little car in for the few minutes that we're in the liquor store. So just something to consider. Car sharing stops at Sheridan. You can't cross Sheridan if you have a car to go. So just something to consider. Hopefully it's in the plan. I was kind of disappointed when I took the train for the first time downtown, the W line, that there's not a car charging station there. There's definitely one in Arvada. Where else was I disappointed? New gas station there at Kipling and 38th. There's not a car charging station. Lucky's, 38th and Wadsworth. There's not a charging station. 38th and Kipling. There's not a charging station. So just nowhere. So just as we're developing things, just keep that in mind. Because sometimes I make decisions about where I'm going to go buy something by, can I plug in for 20 minutes? Most of people who have electric cars, we charge at home. But hey, if I have a choice, I'm going to go somewhere where there's a station. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Judy Capra.
I'm Judy Capra. My address is 7070 West 43rd Avenue. And I wanted to give you a brief report on what's happening with the petition that's been circulating the city for this last month or so. Briefly, that's the petition that protests the ordinance that passed last May to rezone 4 lots on Upham Street from R3 to PRD, which would have allowed 4 single-family homes to be scraped and have 38 townhomes fill that space. Lynn Martinelli and I felt strongly that that wouldn't be an asset to our neighborhood, and we've since learned that most of the residents in Wheat Ridge feel the same way. We started with about 8 people who agreed to carry petitions, and I was getting worried about the scope of the task that we'd undertaken because we needed 1,600 signatures to make it illegal, valid signatures. But fortunately, as we were progressing, other people started to step forward, and we ended up with 32 people who carried petitions. Some just gathered from local family and friends, some gathered hundreds of signatures. Together, we talked with about 2,200 people. So talking with 2,200 people in Wheat Ridge takes a while, especially when each person has a story. But of the 2,200 people, we got about 2,000 signatures. About 90% of the people we talked to agreed to sign the petition. And those are numbers, and that's what counts with a petition, but I think it's more important even what people had to say. Just about everyone we talked with, they volunteered the reasons why they were signing. Or not signing, and so we did a lot of listening, and so you could say we did our own version of the neighborhood revitalization study. It's kind of what it started to feel like anyway. When we'd finished, I asked each petition carrier to send me a list of the most common things they heard when they were talking to people. And I said, it's kind of the top 3 things you heard. Well, nobody submitted 3 things. The more common number was 15 or 20. So I decided a different approach, and I looked to see what was on everybody's lists. And I thought you might like to hear what people were saying. The reasons they signed were, 1, they don't like all of the dense projects that the city has been approving. They really dislike the apartments there at 38th and Wadsworth. I'd say that about 75% of the people specifically mentioned that. They don't want Wheat Ridge to repeat what Denver's been doing to their neighborhoods. And a lot of people told us that they moved from Denver to Wheat Ridge to get away from that. They don't like big developments. Similarly, they don't like tall buildings next to one-story homes. Overall, they feel, quote, the city listens to developers and not to the residents, and there's a lot of resentment and frustration toward the city, especially to anybody involved in planning. Okay, about 10% of the people we talked to didn't sign. The main reason for that is they weren't registered to vote in Wheat Ridge. And then we got the group of people who said, I don't sign any petitions, I don't want my name on lists, and you don't know what's going to happen to them. And then we did get some people who said they didn't mind development, and that was pretty much their comment. Well, no, development's okay. But that was really the minority. The bottom line, which I think meshes really well with the NRA statement that's coming out, is, if I summarized, 1, they really don't trust the city to make decisions about their neighborhoods. They want to be involved. We want to be involved. Yeah. And people want more restrictive zoning regs, and they don't want large-scale developments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all of the people that I had signed up to speak. Is there anyone here who hasn't signed up who would like to speak tonight on anything not on the agenda?
Ehor Figlis, 9775 West 36th Avenue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to share with you something. I was one of the petition carriers that Judy talked about. And I had the opportunity to talk to about 140 people. And what I wanted to share with you was that I was actually surprised how easy it was to get people to sign the petitions, and the reactions that people had to the whole issue of the city and how the city interacts with the neighborhoods and so forth. And basically, I've said before, I mean, I've expressed my admiration for you for agreeing to take on this job. I know that, you know, you're volunteering your time basically. I mean, what you get compensated for is really nothing to do this. But the overall impression I got is that there is a real big disconnect between the people who are running the city and the citizens. And I would encourage all of you, although I know you spent a lot of time at this already, to go out into your neighborhoods, into your districts, walk around, smell the flowers, because they don't smell like the carefully selected bouquets that are presented to you by the city administration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has not signed up who would like to speak under public comment tonight? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor Starker and Council. My name is Rachel Holteen. I live at 4690 Balsam Street. I didn't sign up because I didn't see Airbnbs on the agenda tonight, but after listening to the thoughtful comments from the host, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. I've spoken about this before. Like Christine Disney, I use Airbnb every time I travel, and has really allowed me to get inside neighborhoods in cities I wouldn't otherwise get to. Most big hotels are usually located on interstate corridors and not necessarily in the heart of communities. So I'm really excited that having Airbnbs in our community gives opportunities to other people who wouldn't otherwise even come to Wheat Ridge, let alone come to 38th Avenue or 29th or 26th. I'm speaking in a little bit about the NRS and had been reaching out to different steering committee members to see if they could come tonight, and one of them couldn't come because she was in Oregon. And she shared with me in her response email that while they were in Oregon for 2 weeks, they rented out their house to a family who had come in from Paris because they were having a surrogate baby at Lutheran. And they had come all the way from Paris, and they were able to stay at this house while they were awaiting the birth of their child. And I just thought that was such an extraordinary story. And short-term rentals really are 1,000 stories like that. Heather shared a couple from their registry. So there's that kind of qualitative aspect. But when it comes right down to the policy and what's appropriate for Wheat Ridge, a couple of thoughts I have from my own experience in knowing hosts. Denver recently said you have to be an owner-occupant to do an Airbnb, and I know that that's really created a lot of pushback. I think some of the problems are when people rent out single beds. I think that really is a formula for disaster that brings in really low rent people who come in, and that's really not what we're desiring. So as far as occupancy, I think either you rent out your entire house, or you can rent out a room in your home, but not rent out individual homes or rooms to different people at different times to maintain a little bit more control. I also think licensing and taxing is of great benefit to everyone in the city for predictability and accountability. And then Colorado Springs has a great policy. When you have an Airbnb, you need to notify all your neighbors within like a certain distance of your house that it is an Airbnb, who's the emergency contact. And I think in Wheat Ridge, we are a close-knit community. If it's not owner-occupied, to have, if you don't live within a few miles of the house, then you have a 24/7 person who's available. Because for the most part, there are not a lot of enforcement issues that come up, but when they do, having someone close by makes a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak under public comment tonight? Okay, we will close our public comment portion of our agenda and go to item number 1. Ms. Dozeman, would you introduce item number 1, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consent agenda items. 1A, motion to award a contract and approve subsequent payments to Independent Roofing Specialists, Commerce City, Colorado, in the amount of $481,000 for the Recreation Center roof HVAC repairs and replacement. Consent agenda item 1B, resolution number 41-2019, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the West Metro Fire Protection District for radio specialist services. Consent agenda item 1C, resolution number 42-2019, a resolution authorizing the appropriate city officials to execute an intergovernmental agreement by and between the County of Jefferson, State of Colorado, and the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, regarding the administration of their respective duties concerning the conduct of the coordinated election to be held on November 5th, 2019.
And a motion is in order.
I motion to approve consent agenda items 1A through C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We will go to agenda item number 2. Ms. Weaver, would you introduce agenda item number 2, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, Council Bill number 10-2019, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding the Code of Ethics for city officers and employees.
This is a motion for an ordinance on first reading to set the time for a public hearing. Motion is in order.
I move that we accept Council Bill number 10-2019, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding the Code of Ethics for city officers and employees.
Continue.
Thank you. On first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, August 12th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in City Council chambers, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We'll move to agenda item number 3. Mr. Urban, would you introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That issue is Section 10-15 of the municipal charter for the city of Wheat Ridge requires that an independent audit be performed annually of all city accounts. The CPA firm Clifton Larson Allen performed the audit of the city's financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2018. Once again this year, the city received an unqualified opinion. Representative from the CLA will be here tonight to present the financial statements to council for acceptance.
Mr. Goff, do you have a staff presentation on this?
We do. Ali Sheck, our Administrative Services Director, will introduce the item first.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Alison Sheck, Admin Services Director here at the City of Wheat Ridge. We're delighted to be here this evening presenting our 2018 financial statements, and it really has been our pleasure to work with Clifton Larson Allen, our auditors, for the first time this year. Here this evening, we have Alison Slife and Sarah Seagal. They'll be giving you a presentation or a discussion about their findings. And then also here this evening is our Finance Manager, Mark Colvin. And we'll be here to answer any questions that you have. But my sincere thanks to Alison, Sarah, and Mark for their very timely and hard work on this audit on our behalf. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Alison and Sarah.
Thank you. If you'd just please come to the podium and introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you so much for that nice introduction. So my name is Alison Slife, and I'm principal with CLA, Clifton Larson Allen. And we're going to present the results of the financial statements tonight here and certainly answer any questions that you all might have as it relates to the findings and the results of the audit. So you should have within your packets the actual financial statements, which is going to be the hard copy document, the big copy. So we'll cover a few items within the financial statements, as well as two other letters that are addressed to council and the mayor that are on CLA letterhead. So we'll cover the highlights there if you don't have it in front of you, but we will cover a few things here first. So within the financial statements, if you are looking with the hard copy in front of you, go to page 1 at the very bottom. This is the independent auditor's report or audit opinion for the financial statements covering the calendar fiscal year 2018. So within these pages of pages 1, 2, and 3 is our audit opinion. It does talk about management's responsibilities over the financial statements, the auditor's responsibilities over the financial statements. The most important part, though, of the opinion is at the top of page 2, which does cover the results. So we're happy to report that this was a clean opinion, unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion that the city can get. So congratulations again on achieving that this year. So that's summarized in that paragraph at the very top of page 2. We did want to mention right below that opinions section does talk about an emphasis of a matter. There was a correction related to prior year financial statements. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail. But if you were to compare the opinion that you received last year to this year, that would be a new item to the opinion because there was a correction of an error. So the financial statements that are presented to you are corrected, and so you'll see references to restatement or correction, and that's what that's alluding to, was something that was found during the audit process. Otherwise, within the financial statements, did want to mention a few sections within here. Page 4 at the very bottom here is management's discussion and analysis. And this is a narrative description of what happened year over year. It is from management's viewpoint. So this section is not audited, but we do review it for consistency. Also within this narrative, it does talk about future items that are happening within 2019 and beyond that I'm sure you're well aware of, but that is talked about within this section. So if you're looking for just a quick narrative, what happened during the year, if you don't want to go through the very lengthy document here, that's a good page just to direct your attention within the management discussion analysis. Otherwise, the financial statements are covered. There's a lot of different documents within here in terms of the financial statements, as well as the notes to the financial statements, which does describe kind of the story behind the numbers. So if you're curious about what the city invests in, what kind of capital asset activity, what kind of liabilities, that'll all be told throughout the notes to the financials within that pretty lengthy section of the document. With that, I was not going to cover any other specific pieces in the financials unless there was any questions or comments as it relates to this specific document. Okay. So moving on to some of the required, oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, did you have some questions, Mr. Urban?
I don't know if you're going to cover it later, but the the note 1 regarding the CDOT money, is that going to be covered later? or-
Yes, yeah, we will cover that, but just to, so if you're kind of following along, that is within the financials. I don't have the page right in front of me here, but it is covered in terms of what that audit adjustment was and what that restatement related to. Sarah will cover that in a little bit, though, the narrative behind that, and that is talked about within your action item for tonight. So the next letter that I am going to talk about, it is addressed to the mayor and city council at the very top. At the middle of the page, it says significant audit findings. So this is a required communication that we have with you all being governance for the city. We are directly engaged with governance to perform the audit. We do work very closely with management throughout the process, but we do have an engagement letter directly to you. So we are bound to report certain aspects of the results of the audit to you, and this is what this letter summarizes. So,
Pardon me, do you have a page reference on that letter?
do you all happen to have that within the agenda?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up here.
Yeah, thank you.
It's not part of this. It's a separate.
That's maybe part of our original packet?
Yes.
It is, Mayor, and it follows the 2018 financial statements document.
It's page 134.
Thank you. It is summarized very high level within your action item as well, just as a reference point.
Thank you.
So we are required to communicate any sort of significant accounting policy changes that happened during the year. There were none. We also have to communicate that there are large amounts that are within your financial statements that are estimates. So they're based on third-party information or other sorts of documentation, but they are estimates at the end of the day. So things like capital assets, your self-insurance with your IBNR reserves, as well as the pollution remediation liability affecting the component unit. There's a number of different items that are estimates that we do evaluate for consistency, making sure they seem reasonable, but at the end of the day, they're the best estimate as of that point in time. Moving on to page 2 of this letter, if you're following along within the big packet that you have, we do have to talk about if we have any sort of difficulties in performing the audit. We're happy to report we did not. It was a lot of work that management certainly had to go through, as well as us coming on as new audit firm and working very closely with management throughout the process. And we really appreciated the cooperation and the commitment to really having a quality document at the end of the day. So there is a lot of struggles that both sides go through to go through and get to know each other, but I think it was a successful audit overall, and we were able to get done on time this year. So I did want to just mention that, and that's specifically within the letter as well. Throughout the process, there's certain adjustments that we go through to make sure that the financial statements are materially stated. So that means that amounts are correct to a certain dollar amount to the readers of the financial statements. So to get it to that point, there's certain audit adjustments that we do have to talk to management about and agree upon. So those audit adjustments are attached to that letter for reference point. It's exhibit, I think we labeled it, exhibit B. So those are going to be the corrected misstatements, meaning that they were corrected and your financial statements do show those corrections. Sarah will talk about a little bit more about what that is, but there were several different adjustments we had related to the Capital Projects Fund, the component unit, the Wheat Ridge Urban Renewal Authority, as well as your government-wide statements, which is your full accrual statements within the financials. You only really see those once a year. But those were several different audit adjustments that we did have. There's also things that rise to a level that aren't materially incorrect, meaning the financial statements are fine as is, but there's certain amounts that we agreed on with management that were not significant enough to actually correct, but the things that we call to your attention. So that's also within your packet here. A lot of that relates to timing, so maybe an invoice wasn't booked back to 2018, it was just booked into 2019, for instance. But that's also referred to in this letter for your reference that you can take a look at as well. We do mention if we're any sort of opinion shopping that the city goes through, meaning they went to another auditor to try to get a different result. We're not aware of any of that, so we're required to let you know that as well. And no sort of significant issues that we discussed with management before being engaged throughout the audit, just normal business discussions that we did have. So those are really the highlights of that letter. Within that letter is also attached the management representation letter. So that's a letter that we actually get signed from management saying a lot of different things. So things like they gave us all the city council minutes for us to review, and they let us know about litigation that was going on, and a slew of things that they do let us know that they agreed to throughout the audit process. So that's referenced within this letter for you to, if you want to take a look at as far as what they told us that they did. I'll pause there if there's any questions about that letter. If not, we will talk about the very last letter that should be right in line with your agenda packet. It's called the internal control letter, where it will talk about the findings that we had during this year and kind of the response from management through that process. And I'll let Sarah introduce herself as well, but I'll pause there. Any questions on this specific document?
Council? I guess you may continue. Thank
I'll
you.
let Sarah talk.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Siegel. I was the audit manager for this year's audit and will continue to be going forward as well. So the last letter that we've included in our packet is an internal control letter. It's not a report on the effectiveness of the city's internal controls. It's really just to highlight items that we discovered throughout the audit process that we felt merited the attention of governance. So the first item is the prior period adjustment, which I believe you guys caught on to and referenced. That was related to grant funding. The city has been undergoing some projects where they're receiving federal reimbursement from through CDOT, apologies. So the money's coming from the Federal Department of Transportation, passed through the state Colorado Department of Transportation. And there was a bit of a lag in timing between the reimbursement process. The money was spent but not requested for reimbursement immediately. And really at the government-wide financial statements, the goal is for revenues to match expenditures. So there were a number of revenues that should have been recorded in previous periods that had to be corrected and adjusted for in the current year. So you'll see that reflected in the beginning net position balance. And so that's called to your attention in this letter. The next item is just a high level of the material audit adjustments that had to be posted. Some of these did include invoices that were not submitted to finance for payment on a timely basis, the issuance of a note payable by the Urban Renewal Authority, and some ongoing pollution remediation by the Urban Renewal Authority. And most of those called for additional liabilities to be recorded, and they were significant and material. And so again, we called those to your attention. Are there any questions on the adjustments or this letter as a whole?
Questions from council? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the $782,974 within that prior period adjustment, you have that as a council receivable now, but of what portion of that $782,000 has already been received from CDOT or that we've actually received reimbursement for?
I believe as of the end of the year, it was about $500,000 or $600,000. $536,000.
And then is the remainder still eligible to be reimbursed, or is it in a period where it's not eligible for that?
Yep, it's a several year-long grant agreement, so it is still all eligible for reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Additional questions for our auditors? Nothing right now?
Thank
Does
you.
that conclude your report? Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any discussions or additional questions for our auditors? Are we ready for motion? All right, Mr. Urban, would you please provide us a motion on item number 3?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just pulling it up here. I move to accept the 2018 financial statements from Clifton, Larson, and Allen.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion?
Who is the second?
Ms. Hoppy?
Okay.
Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-0. It's good I clarified because I would have written down Dozeman.
Oh, that's okay. Ms. Hoppy, would you please introduce item number 4, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 4 is a resolution number 40-2019, a resolution adopting the 2019 Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Update and accepting its findings and recommendations. At issue, City Council's 2018-19 strategic plan identified an update to the NRS as one of the top 5 priorities. The update of the NRS was initiated in mid-2018, and its final report and recommendations were presented to City Council at June 3rd, 2019 study session. The process has been guided over the past year by a 26-person council-appointed citizen steering committee. The NRS is intended to serve as a guiding policy document for City Council and staff for the next 5 to 10 years. As such, it is proposed to be formally adopted by a City Council resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Do we have a staff presentation on this?
We do. Ken Johnson, our Community Development Director.
Johnson.
Yeah, just briefly, we obviously had this in front of you at a June 3rd study session to get a little more in the weeds, if you will, on the details of the document, and our consultant was here to go through that as well. And then we have an upcoming meeting coming up on August 5th where we want to talk with you about a work plan over the next couple of years. So, but maybe just a little more building off Councilwoman Hoppy's discussion and introduction there about what the process has been. So, as Council is aware, the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy was originally adopted back in 2005 after a very extensive public involvement process. And in the intervening nearly 15 years, unbelievably, it's really served as a very important policy document for us. It's informed many of the decisions of past and present councils, and certainly had gave a lot of direction in terms of a staff workload over the last 10 or so years as well. It was the origin of the formation of Wheat Ridge 2020, which is now Local Works. It was a precursor to the update to the comprehensive plan and to 4 different sub-area plans that have been adopted over the last several years. And then, of course, for my department, it drove a lot of the land use regulatory changes that were adopted over the last several years with council support through the multiple ordinance process. As noted in Ms. Hoppy's update, an update to the NRS was one of Council's top strategic planning priorities based on your most recent strategic plan. With that in mind, in mid-2018, CZB consultants were actually brought on board, same consultant that did the original NRS, to lead a broad public process. Subsequent to that, City Council sought nominations for a citizen steering committee, and ultimately you appointed all 26 people that nominated themselves, and that group really took on a very robust role in this process and spent literally thousands of hours collectively guiding this process through a series of public meetings, various small group meetings, kitchen table types of meetings as well. So, and then ultimately 1,000 people participated in a citizen survey that was online as well. So a really robust public engagement process. The draft of the NRS contains a lot of recommendations. It's a little different format than the first NRS, which is not unexpected. We expect it'll really impact and guide a lot of our work plan for the next 5 to 10 years. It's envisioned as kind of a 2030 timeframe for the document. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be back in front of you if you take action tonight to approve this on August 5th to get more in the weeds on what that work program looks like for the next 1 to 2 years. So I'll leave it at that and be glad to answer questions.
Thank you. Before we go to questions from the council, I would like to invite speakers from the public. I have a number of people who have signed up to speak on this. And our first speaker is Jay Harris and Corey Stites on deck. Mr. Harris here. All right, we'll pass on Mr. Harris. Corey Stites and Rachel Holteen on deck.
I didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Corey Stites, 11885 West 35th Avenue. I want to thank council and the mayor, city staff, the consultants from CCB, and our fantastic steering committee. As one of the steering committee chairs, I was honored to be a part of this process. I'm excited about many of the recommendations in here. I do want to be clear that this is not any one person's document. This is the document that the city came up with. This is the citizens reaching out and talking to the elected officials and the staff and saying, this is what we want. We were just changing. The country's changing. we can't stop change. All we can do is management and do the best we can to benefit from it. The NRS was impaneled to make sure that as we change, we're strengthening our households and making sure that we have more opportunity to grow economically. And once adopted tonight, I believe that this NRS is going, or this document is going to give us the opportunity to do that. Once adopted tonight, the real work starts though. We've done all these robust processes and spoken to people, but we still need to do more. So the listening tour is going to be huge. But we also need to hold ourselves accountable to the different things that are in this document, including public process and making sure that we don't have as many people showing up to public comment complaining about development, things like that, because we want to make sure that the citizens are heard. One of the things that was key in all of our meetings that we had with the citizens is they want to hear more, or they want to be heard more as they go through these processes. So sitting in a public process meeting and being told that that's okay, but we'll get to that later, isn't something that they want to hear anymore about. They want to hear, how are we going to solve our issues and how are we going to do it going forward? Aging housing and aging commercial stock is a big issue for Wheat Ridge going forward, and making sure that we streamline and give ourselves the best opportunity for economic development. Renovation is going to be big, rehab is going to be big, and giving some of those opportunities for people to come in and redevelop and rehab their houses, going through the permitting process, making sure that that's streamlined, giving a permit concierge, neighborhood communication specialists, things like that, that can help the citizens go through an intimidating process. And I've gone through that myself as both a citizen and as a business owner. And having somebody to step in and speak for me was really important. So I appreciate that from the council people and from the staff that did that, but it would be good that we did that for everybody. Going forward, we have an opportunity as citizens, we have an opportunity as staff, as elected officials, to make sure that everything in this NRS comes out and it can be as successful as the last one. And we have opportunities over the next 10 years to really grow the city and do the right thing to make sure that the citizens are happy and trust the process even more. So I appreciate the council, Mr. Mayor, staff, and all of the people on the steering committee for all their hard work, and now we're ready to do the real work, so thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Hulteen and Chris Bird on deck.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Rachel Hulteen, and I'm one of the 3 co-chairs of the steering committee. So myself and Corey, and unfortunately Kathleen Martell could not be here tonight. Several things that I was going to touch on have already been said, either by Corey or by Ken tonight. So I'm going to just, and I'm excited that August 5th, you guys are ready to already roll up your sleeves and figure out how to implement this. So I'm going to just cross off like beating you guys over the head about implementation, because that's always the biggest concern everyone has when we've spent 12 months and we've had 2,000 points of contact, that all of that effort goes and then nobody knows what happens next. So I'm really excited to hear that we already know what happens next and that we'll be back in this room really quickly to talk about that. So I'm going to pivot my talking points just a little bit based on that and really focus on what I feel like I learned through talking with citizens, through talking with my co-chairs, and through talking with the different steering committee members. What we learned is that Wheat Ridge is happy with Wheat Ridge. And what we need to do is really figure out good processes to express that and to make sure that the voices of the people who really love it are able to advocate for what they love, and that we're able to see that both today and tomorrow in the future. One of the things that came up that kind of surprised me but made a lot of sense was, well, let me backtrack. I went into this with this big whole, buffet of things that were going to, come up that we didn't know what they were in big visions. And instead what we learned is we need to finish things we've started. We can't start big things and not make sure that we keep them moving forward. I also learned that we don't need a whole bunch of new things, but we need a lot of clarity on what the next big thing is. And we need to start it with solid first steps. And the other thing that I learned is that there's a paradox that came out of the NRS, and it is that we both need to hurry up and we need to slow down. And I think the clearest message when I look at the big recommendations around building resident capacity through neighborhood engagement and connecting the community by investing in primary corridors and customer service improvements is that we need to start every process with the community first. And that's the slow down part. And I think the NRS really lays the table out for us to stop and say, how do we get community engaged early and often and consistently and keep building that? And I think that that's something everyone in this room wants, and we haven't always known how to do it. And I think the first NRS set a whole bunch of really ambitious goalposts and said it's a 50-yard dash, go. And Wheat Ridge was wildly successful in some of those, and on other ones, they had, we can't meet all of those big ambitious goals. This NRS said, get your steps in. How you do that is the prerogative of the people who are going to sit on the dais in the next 10 years. It's the prerogative of the community members who are going to take an interest in our city and want to engage in conversations about their community and about businesses and about what we look like today and tomorrow. And the NRS, I think, opens the door to all of that. But what we do in the next year, I think, is the critical first steps around laying the framework of engaging citizens and really stepping back and realizing that we have changed, we are changing, we will change. And with that continuity, especially big infrastructure projects like 38th Avenue and 44th Avenue, there's going to be a lot of change even during that. And how do we have a really stable footing at the beginning so that we can solidly finish up the things that we start? So my last point that I think is really important is this exact point in time, literally right now, tonight, this minute. We have 26 dedicated steering committee members who are really excited about what's next. We have a really capable elected body. We have amazing staff. We have a lot of citizens who just had this conversation. So the momentum starting a minute after I'm done speaking is so important to continue. And so I really ask everyone who is taking the next step to keep building on those capacity that we have as a city and what we have just done and are doing, and don't hesitate to draw on the people who've been engaged to keep them supporting you guys so that whatever happens next, we can be really solid. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Bird and Christine Disney on deck.
Hi, my name is Chris Bird. My address is 4931 Garrison Street, number 206. And I was a steering committee member with some of my fellow people here as well. And we did all work very hard. We were all dedicated to this process. We talked to so many people in small meetings and at larger meetings and the open houses. And it felt like the community was really behind this to get their voices heard and make sure we were making something that really reflected them. And with the listening to a recommendation that's in this NRS, I think that's really the cornerstone to rebuilding some of that trust that we heard was a little lost between the city and the residents. And I think that would also give us a good opportunity to build a plan for the building resident capacity as far as density and leaving single-family homes in certain areas and things of that nature. And it'll further connect the community by creating the strong plan for the corridors, especially 44th, Kipling, Wadsworth, and finishing 38th. And that would also quell many of the citizens' concerns with beautification in the process. And this document really gives us the opportunity to work together as citizens and staff and our elected officials to really build a Wheat Ridge that's beautiful and that works for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine Disney and Dorothy Archer on deck.
Had I thought about this, I would have all made you a sign that you could put on your desk that says, "You can't make everyone happy. You're not an avocado." So, that being said, my experience of the NRS process was much different than Ms. Capra's assertion that she conducted her own NRS. The process that we employed over the last 12 months was not to go out and seek unhappy people or people who were complaining, but to get input and listen, and do it in a constructive way that the city could move forward with solid suggestions on what the community wants. We listened. We didn't foment derision or division. And what we found out was that everybody's pretty happy with Wheat Ridge. They like living here. They believe in the process. They like their elected officials. I didn't hear many complaints. What I did hear dealt mostly with process. Can we make code enforcement more consistent? Can we make sure that we have the citizens' input beforehand? But so much of that is hard to determine because as we've become more of a technical society, we're losing the touchstones that kept everybody informed. Local newspapers, radio stations. We don't have any of that in Wheat Ridge, and so that tends to get people who are not in tune with how to get information to feel like there's some conspiracy theories going on. I saw none of that. Everybody that was on the steering committee believed in the process, worked very hard to gather the information, and what you have before you now is an excellent document of which you can move forward on and make the city even better than it is. Wheat Ridge is actually a pretty great place to live. People may not like the architecture, they may not like some of the development, but from what I can tell, it has been well thought out and planned. So if you can keep on that trajectory, I think in 10 years, if you do another NRS, you'll get an over 75% approval rating. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dorothy Archer and Ihor Figlis on deck.
My name is Dorothy Archer, 3640 Marshall Street. Good evening, Council, Mayor Starker. Just to defend Judy Capra, we didn't go out with a petition to find angry people. That wasn't it all. Our major concern was changing a residential zone to a PRD for a contractor. We totally agreed that 22 houses on the residential zone was great. But to change it to 38, we questioned that. Our concern was, what right does someone have to change a residential zone for the contractor? No, we didn't get 100% negative. We had concerns. Where does it go from here? And yes, I don't think I got anybody saying they didn't love Wheat Ridge, but they are concerned. Where does it go from here? Growth is great, but where's the compromise? 22 to 38, 140 units, maybe 100. Lucky's development, that was presented as, if I remember straight, townhouses. What do we have now? 250 apartments? I'm not quite sure, was that changed to an MU? The zoning? I can't tell you how many people, as I stood 3 hours leaning against a grocery cart at Safeway, hour in and hour out. And I didn't get many done in those 3 hours because I listened to what people had to say.
Ms. Archer, are you speaking about the NRS? That's really
I
the
am.
topic.
It's all encompassed.
Thank you.
And my hat goes off to the DRS people. The things I'm saying depend on your decisions. I think the fulfillment that those people have given this past year is absolutely outstanding. The hours, the concern, and the care. I thank them. Please take into consideration the things that we too have found out. And thank you, Ms. Holstein, for the recommendations you have made towards making us totally transparent and letting the citizens know when something is going on. The paper would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ihor Figlis.
Ihor Figlis, 9775 West 36th Avenue. I'm here to urge you not to accept the NRS. There is, as I see it, a huge flaw in the report. I would like to direct your attention to page 37 of the report. I mean, this is in other places as well, but under recommendation, in the middle of the first paragraph, it says, well, it says, the recommendation says, Wheat Ridge should undertake a neighborhood listening tour across the entire city in order to find the problem. Over time, this may reveal a need for ongoing neighborhood engagement, neighborhood plans, or other neighborhood-based public investments. Okay, now if you look up above that on the same page, it says there in large letters that 79% of the people polled already agreed or strongly agreed that there is a need to engage or re-engage. So how can you say that the study found that 79% of the people agreed that there's a need to engage, and then you want to create a listening tour that's going to possibly reveal ongoing neighborhood engagement? It's here. People said they want to be engaged. So what this should be doing is not setting up, not delaying the process by creating an additional listening tour or hiring additional staff people that are going to find out what the neighborhood wants. 79% of the people said what they want. And if you're going to delay the process, are you also going to take up and pass a moratorium on all further rezonings and developments until you find out what the people want? What this study should be recommending is the implementation of this 79% of the people who already said they want to engage, and not a listening tour that's going to determine whether or not engagement is needed. I urge you not to accept this study, rewrite it, have it rewritten, and have it applied the way that the findings really are reflected. And I will also underscore that when we went out looking for those petition signatures, we didn't go out looking for disgruntled people. I talked to everybody one after another, and I came up with what I came up with.
Thank you. That's all of the speakers I have signed up to speak on item number 4. Is there anyone who hasn't signed up who would like to speak at this time? Please come forward.
I'm going to make, Julie Clark, 3821 Holland. I'm going to make coming to city council meetings my new hobby. In part because when I read about things like this and I realize nobody in my neighborhood was in part of this 2,000 people, didn't know what was going on, I read the Little Connections newspaper that comes out whenever it comes out, didn't read anything in there about it. So, you know, I don't know where I would have ever known that this was going on, because I didn't. You know, if it's on Facebook, then I'm never going to see it, because not on Facebook. So I'm going to make this my hobby. And, you know, and I'm not a naysayer. I've lived here for 33 years. But what I will tell you is infrastructure is one thing, but there is precious few places in Wheat Ridge that I either eat, shop, or whatever, just because there's not a great deal of variety. And I'm not sucking up, but West 29th is the only good restaurant worthy of the cooking better than I do. You know, I mean, we go elsewhere. We'll go to Tennyson Street. I'd rather go downtown to Larimer Square or to Union Station to eat, because if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I'm going to go have really good food, you know? And those kind of places just don't exist here. I wish they did. You know, it'd be great to be able to Sunday morning have gone to breakfast somewhere in Wheat Ridge and sat outside in the sunshine and watched the dogs walk by. I mean, that would have been great. We just don't have that here. And I know that's a long-term vision, but man, I've lived here 33 years and we've been talking about this for at least 25 of them. So that's it. So I'm just going to say you're going to see me a lot because I'm going to make this my hobby, unless there's a fly fishing thing that conflicts, and then that's going to win out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has not signed up but would like to speak on this matter? This is where you get all the information right here. All right, we will close our public comment on this, and I will open this up to questions from council of staff. Do we have questions from staff on this? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One area of concern that I have regarding these recommendations is on the subject of accessory dwelling units, and it's indicating that the recommendation on how to move forward is table the consideration of ADUs for a minimum of 2 years. So, I mean, is that even legal to say we're just going to ignore an issue for a set period of time? And how do we define ignoring it, because there's existing properties that have an accessory dwelling unit, and so how do we legally define that we're ignoring this issue?
Mr. Johnstone or Mr. Goff or
Hard legal. Mr. Dahl, do you have a response to that?
Well, the city has the right to enforce its ordinances, and like any other enforcement process, you prioritize, and you hear that all the time from the police chief. We've heard that in relation to a number of recent study sessions on different issues, and so you certainly have the right to prioritize this issue. You're not required by law to put this issue in front of necessarily any others. So it's priorities. Yes, these, to the extent there's violations of law, you're required to, or you have the right to enforce. Where there are defects in your code that are identified for you, of the right, and I think the moral obligation, the legislative obligation to address them. But the schedule you do that under is set by you. There's not a sort of a due process rule out there that would apply in this case. If you've got a pending case in front of the court or something, yeah, there's a time frame there that those defendants have rights. But here they're not defendants yet because the city hasn't chosen to act in any affirmative way.
Well, I guess my concern here is I understand setting priorities and saying these are the things we're going to work on, but this is different in the sense that we're isolating this issue and saying we're not working on this. In fact, we are ignoring it, whereas in reality, in the community, we have properties that are defined or have a definition of an accessory dwelling unit and exist. So I feel like that we're putting them in somewhat of a limbo by saying we're explicitly ignoring this issue. But you're saying that that's perfectly legal.
Well, yes, I'm saying that's perfectly legal. You're saying it's not right, and it's should be a legislative priority for us. And you absolutely have the right to do that, but there's not a law that you're violating by not making it a first priority. And I realize it'd be great if there were, that would be a better answer to the question you're asking, but I can't put it that way.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chair Dahl. And then I guess my concern about this is that that's fine if we don't want to deal with accessory dwelling units, then we should just take it out of this report as far as a recommendation and leave it as an issue that needs to be dealt with. But to explicitly call it out as saying we're not dealing with that, I've never seen us take that approach before in a strategy document to say, here's everything we're going to do, and then here's this one thing we're not going to touch. It just doesn't ring true with me.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppe?
I need to clarify.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Johnstone, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to,
Johnstone, did you want to interlude into here?
I did, if I could. Just some clarification on what I believe the document recommends and what our current status is with what we call ADUs, right? But there's actually no such thing as an accessory dwelling unit in the city of Wheat Ridge. We don't acknowledge it. We've never acknowledged it as a concept. And so when we encounter something that might walk and talk like an ADU, if it's a secondary unit on an existing residential property, it's not actually an accessory dwelling. It's likely an illegal dwelling, right? And that's how we generally treat them. Now, what we do is we look at the balance of the facts, right? So if there's evidence that we issued a building permit for it, or the county issued a building permit for it, or we issued a separate electrical service for it, or they've had a separate water and sewer tap for years, if it was just commonly known that it's been there for a long time. So we look at the kind of the balance of the evidence as to whether we think it's kind of should be legally grandfathered in. And so, you know, we encounter these on a, I would say, maybe not a weekly basis, but pretty close. And we really just look at the balance of the evidence as to whether we're going to tell that person that, you know, there's kind of several options. One, it's an illegal dwelling, you built it without a permit, and you built it 2 years ago and it needs to go away. Another scenario often is it's you know, very substandard in terms of codes, right? And it's not a safe structure. In that case, we think it should be legalized, but we're going to make sure they meet it up to some minimum code standards. And you know, in some cases, the balance of the evidence suggests that it violates the zoning because it's an extra unit more than they should have had, but it's been there since before the city was codified, and it's legal, and you don't have to do anything to it. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, there was a stay of enforcement as a potential future agenda, but that has not been on illegal dwellings, I guess it would be. That has not yet been scheduled for further discussion. As it pertains to the report, the recommendation is that as a policy matter, we don't bring this up as a potential code change that would allow ADUs in some form or fashion moving forward. So just the clarification, we will continue to enforce as we've always enforced in terms of when we encounter evidence of a second dwelling unit that doesn't otherwise comply with the code. Typically it doesn't comply because the property is not zoned for multiple dwellings on the property.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Dahl. So, you know, the recommendation, and you said that, you know, we have the right to prioritize. We can move it up and prioritization. Yeah, we can make it more of a priority than the recommended time. So the recommended time is 2 years, but we can make it a higher priority sooner than that, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional discussion? Ms. Dozman?
So that was actually my comment as well, is that I have a really hard time with coming outright in a visionary document saying that we're going to defer anything. I think that that has been a large topic of conversation, and I understand that we have the authority to override that at any point in time, but I think that if we're going to be using this as a guiding foundational document to move us forward, that we should be doing that and not just putting a stop sign on anything, any one policy in particular. And I want to say that this has been a robust public process, and I thought that this was going to be the listening tour. And after speaking with some of the co-chairs, I got an understanding of what kind of action needs to be taken, what further action needs to be taken. And so I really appreciate them, you know, reaching out and saying, okay, well, what are any questions that you have, and where do you see us going from here? And I just want to say that I think that we have a tremendous organization and group of people that we can lean on in order to implement this document. And I really feel that it is our job as city council members to be at the forefront of that work and be at the forefront of that listening tour, because, you know, we were elected to represent the people, and I know that this burden is going to be put on staff as far as the logistics, but I think it really is encompassed in our job as elected officials to do that listening. And so I would just implore all of us to, you know, get our boots on the ground and do what we do. You know, we knock on doors when we campaign, and now it's time to knock on those doors and just hear our citizenry and what they're feeling and how, what they think of, you know, the development and revitalization and neighborhood planning, and really be a part of that process at the beginning. And so that they're just cheering what is going on as opposed to coming in and not understanding. So that's my comments, and I just want to thank the NRS organization for doing this a tremendous amount of work. I know it took a lot of your time. I know that all of you are very dedicated to Wheat Ridge and this community and what you would like to see happen in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional discussion on the motion. Mr. Urban? Or I guess we're still on questions of staff.
Then I'll wait.
We haven't made a motion yet.
Mr. Mayor, could I have a
Mr.
comment
Goff.
too? Yeah, I would just like to also thank the NRS Steering Committee, and they did put a tremendous amount of work into this, and they're very proud of it, and need to apologize to them. This item was regularly scheduled for August 12th to come forward in front of City Council, but our study sessions are really busy for the rest of the year, and the Mayor Pro Tem and I juggled a few things, and we moved this item up to tonight, and that wasn't communicated thoroughly with the steering committee, so there was no intention behind that. So apologize. I know they had to juggle some schedules to be here too, so, but just want to thank them again for their hard work.
In my apologies, we are not at a motion, so additional questions of staff. Then, Ms. Hoppy, a motion is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve resolution number 40-2019, a resolution adopting the 2019 Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Update and accepting its findings and recommendations.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion now on the motion? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, something that Ms. Rachel Hulteen mentioned about this process allowing us to put community first, and the discussion around creating a more neighborhood-based approach to our zoning regulations and the like, and managing change in that way, I think is an appropriate way to go. But my other concern here is not so much on the aspect of community first, it's community last, in that as much as we might listen to the citizens, that needs to translate into the votes that are made, so that when people speak and we're listening, that they see the results of that listening, not just having them come to a meeting and then our body makes a completely different decision than what was presented. And so as much as we're going to go into the neighborhoods and create these sort of blocks, if you will, I would like to commit as much to that process as to listening and carrying out the voice that the residents bring to us in those neighborhood type meetings, because that's one of my main concerns about this process and this sort of bifurcation of the city into neighborhoods, is making sure that we're actually listening to the feedback that we're getting in that particular category. I would like to make a motion to remove the ADU recommendation from the NRS report, and so I'll make a motion to remove that from the report as it stands.
And that is an amendment?
Correct.
So we have an amendment to remove the, I guess, defer the accessory dwelling unit. Is there a second?
Second.
We have now an amendment to remove defer accessory dwelling unit regulations, and we'll have discussion on the amendment. Mr. Pond.
Thank you. I don't disagree with some of the points that were raised. I will caution that I think that if it's completely extracted from the report at this point and drops off, then we're losing some context that I think is important with folks. So it is a topic. It comes up. I think if we completely extracted it, it would still come up, and then we would say, well, we did think about it, but you can't see that because we took it out, and so we're going to be kind of tripping over ourselves to explain it. My interpretation of it is more that it was put in there as a, hey, our interpretation is this isn't the right policy piece right now. That's what we heard from people, so it's part of the listening. So all of the reports that we got, that's what I heard. And if I'm wrong, you tell me. But that's what I heard, was that the consultants and the team listened and did not hear that this was a policy priority from the people who were talking, and therefore stated that it should be kind of set back. And by the way, the reason probably, and I'm guessing completely right now, that they may have felt compelled to put that in is that if we recall in our ramp up to this, when we hired a consultant and when we came out of our retreat, we thought that ADUs were very important. my interpretation of this is as they were going and doing this, it became actually less important. And the reason it shows up in here is to kind of close the loop on our thought that this was really important and we need to do it. And so it's almost a response to that. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. But from that standpoint, I agree that I don't want to, I think it's weird to be kind of participating in the negative in here. However, the context is important. So if we do, I probably won't vote for this amendment as it stands, but if it passes, I'm just going to suggest that we make sure that however it gets amended in the document doesn't extract the context. I don't know if I'm wrong about anything I've said. I apologize. It was mostly speculative.
Ms. Davis?
I just want to mirror what Mr. Pond had to say. I support his thoughts because that's actually what I thought in the very beginning. We as council kind of came up with a list of questions of what we were going to ask and what we thought was important to our community. So by extracting it, it does kind of, you lose the historical value of we asked it, it was a mediocre response, not as much of a priority as other things. So I just want to support what he said, and that is the reason why I wouldn't want to extract it, because we did address it. We did ask folks about it, and it just didn't bubble to the top.
Ms. Hoppy?
At the retreat, when this first came up, I pushed back really hard on this because I felt like that we shouldn't wait that long for ADUs, and I still believe that we should not wait that long for ADUs. While it's a recommendation, it's in the report, which is a working document, and then we can adjust our priorities as that, because it's a live document, and so it's things, as things come up and move and shift, then we can bring it up sooner. So I don't want to remove it because I want it in the document. I want it on there. It's extremely important to several people in my district, and it came out as lukewarm in all of the NRS steering committee meetings, but it's more than lukewarm to a lot of people in District 1. So I want to keep it in there, and I want to have it be, as it's supposed to, a live document, and we can hopefully have it as a higher priority than wait too long. So I won't be voting to remove it.
Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The idea that we're postponing this because it's not a high priority is, in my mind, doesn't really connect, because the recommendation says at this time political acceptance of ADUs is premised on making a promise that the city cannot keep, that an ADU will only be occupied by a member of the family. The basis for the ADU allowance in other cities, affordable housing and rental income to the homeowners of expensive homes, are not winning arguments in Wheat Ridge. In the meantime, the resources dedicated to debating ADUs, which would become a niche housing product at best, would be better spent on more pressing matters. So it's more of an issue of it's not politically viable right now, so we have to kick the can down the road. And in my mind, we should be dealing with this right here and now. And this, the language in this recommendation suggests that it's just not politically viable right now, so we just don't want to touch it. But I think we need to be dealing with this right now, and that's why I'm asking for it to be removed.
Thank you. Mr. Keeter?
I think I'm with Mr. Pond about keeping the recommendations from the report in the report, but my sense is that there seems to be something approaching consensus that we do go forward in dealing with it. So and feel free to, George, correct me if I'm wrong, that the idea is that we leave it in the report, but that we still have I view it as accepting that that's the recommendation that they've made, not necessarily adopting that recommendation as policy. And so we acknowledge that the consultants have said this is not the time necessarily for this fight, but we have the right to come to a different conclusion.
Ms. Dozman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I also want to look to the neighborhood revitalization strategy document, the final document. Mr. Urban has already referenced it, and they have a tidbit in here from the 2018 community survey, and that was sent out to 4,000 households in Wheat Ridge. And the responses that were returned were 27% in support, 26% somewhat in support, 23% neither support nor oppose, 11% somewhat oppose, and 13% strongly oppose. So that leaves us with 53% of support in some manner or another, and then only 24% of not supporting, and then 23% could go either way. And so the 2019 NRS Community Open House found that 40%, which is 30 people, were a yes when regarding this issue, 11%, 8 people were a no, and 49%, so 37 people were an it depends. So really this policy issue isn't just a matter of we do or do not want it, it's a how is it going to be implemented, what does it look like for Wheat Ridge, and how do we fit the policy to fit the paradigm of our community. And so I think that this is, while I feel it is a good recommendation, and I could go either way as to whether it's on this document, I feel like having a what did you call it, a no vision for a negative for this, I don't see the point, because it's going to be continuously coming up, just as we have seen, and I feel like this is just to kick the can down the road, and I don't know if this was really an act taken by council in the retreat, or if it was really a recommendation by CZB just because of the political will, and whether other things were a priority to the community, such as the listening tour, because that is also what they specifically recommend as far as the ADUs. So after the portion that Mr. Urban just read, they say that specifically the city should conduct a full round of neighborhood engagement in the form of a listening tour to understand what residents care about at a neighborhood level and how they feel about potentially divisive topics like ADUs. So we recognize that this is a very divisive topic, and at this point in time, it sounds like the consultants feel that some of the other recommendations are more important because ADUs would be so divisive. So why not move forward with what we agree on as opposed to being hung up on what we disagree on? So those are just some of my thoughts, and I did just want to reference the community survey because I think there's a little bit of miscommunication and misrepresentation of those actual percentages out in the community. So as far as that goes, we do have more residents that came out in support of it than came out in opposition.
Additional discussion on the amendment. And as I understand the amendment, it is to not defer the discussion for possible regulations on ADUs.
I think it was to remove the recommendation.
Oh, to remove the language about ADUs totally from the report?
I believe.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the motion.
That was the motion.
Yes. That's the amendment?
Okay. It's basically page 58.
Okay. So is there further discussion on the amendment? Okay, will the clerk please poll the council on the amendment?
I'm a little unclear, Mr. Mayor. Did you say that the motion is just to remove the recommendations or not?
I'm gonna let
remove
Mr.
all
I'm
the
gonna let Mr. Urban
information.
rephrase his amendment so that I don't try to interpret it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to remove the recommendation to table the consideration of ADUs for a minimum of 2 years. I'd like to remove that recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, everyone clear? Please poll the council.
Motion fails wait a minute. Yeah. Okay, that's better. Motion fails 2-5 with council members Davis, Pond, Hoppy, Weaver, and Keeter voting no.
Thank you. Okay, we are back to discussion of the main motion. Mr. Pond.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll forget something in all of this, but I want to thank everyone again. And we've done this now a few times, but I don't think there's enough thanks that we can heap on to the folks who have come in and done this work. in many ways, work that because of its duration and number of touch points and connections is in many ways more intense than the stuff that we have to do up here. And so thank you. I hope you all feel like we are sincerely grateful for it. I am, and I believe everyone is up here. And that we don't take it for granted. And I say that, and let me just extend a couple of comments. I don't take this for granted moving forward either, and I know there's a lot of, there's nerves and fear that's wrapped up in all of this, and as there should. These are hard topics. Why come back and do the NRS? This was definitely one of my goals. I mean, I think everyone knows I wanted to do this again, and frankly, the NRS was in many ways why I even moved to Wheat Ridge, because I thought they had a plan, and I liked it. And that's certainly better than not having a plan or having a plan that I don't like. So, I think that it really was. It was a big reason why I came here. I've learned so much through this, because maybe I was thinking, gosh, we're gonna have this big, the goalposts, right? We're gonna have another big set of goalposts, and we're gonna do our 50-yard dash again, and look how far we're gonna get. And so I loved what Rachel had to say about now it's time to get our steps in. And you know what? I guess I didn't think that's what I was gonna hear, but that's why we did this, right? To hear, to listen. To see new things in new ways, and I think coming to this realization that we did a tremendous amount of work, and that now we have to solidify our foundation of how we communicate and how we listen, how we engage our neighborhood, and keep getting our steps in. And I really like that. So perhaps it wasn't exactly the results that I imagined, but I'm not disappointed in any way. We took a hard look, and we're setting ourselves up to move forward. I'm very committed to continuing the momentum. This is just a moment in time where we're going to hopefully push the green buttons and move forward. And then we're going to be right back sitting down there, rolling up our sleeves and talking about how to put this in place. And I think the folks who have been listening will hopefully have seen and heard that we are serious about that. We've already talked about that. We're talking about it as a part of our 2020 budget, concepts and that we're very, very serious about that. So, it's definitely hard to sit and hear, both sides, and certainly some negative feelings that are coming forward. To be honest, it's not easy to always, to listen to that in the context of, especially of feeling in many ways positive, and trying to celebrate the accomplishment of getting to this NRS. But I think it's evidence that it's why this NRS again is important, and it's why the recommendations are important. It says go out. It says start to listen. It says start to listen, specifically in a way that has geographical relevance, and I think that's important. So I could keep going, and I won't. I apologize for going so long. You guys are like, shush. Thank you. I will vote for this, and I will continue to support this while I am sitting up here and when I am down in those chairs too. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also do want to say thank you again. And I keep trying to think of how can we even say thank you as a city to a point where the steering committee feels thanked. But anyways, thank you. I also, I hear the hurry up, but yet slow down. And because I kind of feel the same way, I want to make sure we hit the ground running. There's nothing more frustrating than working really hard to put together a plan and to see it gather dust. And it's something that I'm committed to making sure it doesn't happen. I want to make sure that we hit the ground running and that we are able to align this with our strategic plan goals that as a council that we came up with a couple of years ago that we're working towards, and to make sure that we're able to get all of this on the same road, on the same cart, behind the same horse, and get it moving down the road. So again, thank you so much to the committee members, and I look forward to hearing next week about the implementation strategy and where we're going to start putting the work in. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
I think.
I got a motion. Leanna, you seconded it.
Take back your second, give it to me. It's a foul.
Okay.
What? Is that a joke?
Original motion.
Go ahead. A motion carries 6-1 with Councilmember Urban voting no.
Thank you. That concludes our business portion of the agenda. We will now go to city managers matters. Mr. Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next Monday, July 29th is the fifth Monday, so don't show up. There will be no council meeting. And also, we've been notified by RTD, I believe I forwarded you and all an email. They are starting to remove the flaggers from the G line. So you'll start to see those folks disappear. And also, we've been monitoring, as Mr. Matthews mentioned, I believe it was last week at study session, the parking lot at the Word station is pretty full, close to 90%. Our IGA with RTD says that once it hits a 90% capacity, we got to figure out exactly what that means for RTD. I don't think it's spelled out efficiently in the IGA, but once it hits a 90% capacity, they'll start to have discussions about expanding the parking lots. So staff is meeting with RTD, I believe, soon to start discussing that, so that we're proactive in making sure that we have ample parking there. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney's matters, Mr. Dahl.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Thank you so much. We'll go to elected officials matters and start with our clerk, Ms. Shaver.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Keeter.
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Dozman.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mr. Urban.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Ms. Davis.
So I have a couple things. I wanted to kind of follow up on some things that Mr. Goff had said. I actually used the Gold Line on Wednesday to go to the baseball game. And I know that there were some comments at a previous meeting that it was kind of, the usage was kind of scattered and, you know, just a handful of people. Well, I will tell you, there was only about 3 parking spots left before I had to park on the street. And there were people parked on the street. So I was thrilled to see the usage of the Gold Line, and I was even further thrilled that I was the first stop on the way to downtown versus the last stop, because there were people standing in the cars. So I want to bring that up, as well as also on my way home, there was a smattering of Rockies fans and folks that work downtown. So I wanted to bring that up. I also wanted to kind of share some comments tonight around the short-term rentals. I actually was in Cheyenne Frontier Days for 3 days. There was 5 of us that rented a VRBO. We parked 2 cars. We didn't throw any big parties. But we enjoyed the ability to be able to sit and play cards around a table with a group of people. We enjoyed the ability to, instead of paying $300+ a night for each hotel room, to be able to kind of share rooms and space and bring breakfast and make brunches and also be a part of the community. Walk down to, actually they had a parade and do some things like that. So it was a great experience. It is something that I support, and I support it even more so. I'm surprised I did for the record, text Miss Disney, because I was surprised she didn't bring up the difference and how short-term rentals, at least we have more, I know one of the speakers spoke of it, there's a little bit more oversight than long-term. You know, the good news is if there's a bad apple, they're only there for a couple days versus the bad apple that's there for a couple years, tearing down a property in the neighborhood. So I'm not sure, it's something I really support, and I look forward to doing some more research and more discussion around it for our city. And finally, one last thing. Peach sales for the Wheat Ridge Rotary is still open. So be a peach and order peaches. Go to wheatridgerotary.org. Again, this is one of their two major fundraisers. They give back to our community. I really encourage you all to order. They do sell a case or a half a case, which is unusual because most of the time you only can buy a case. But again, I encourage the full case. Give to your friends, neighbors, people you work with, and email me if you want me to. I'll deliver it for you, but it's also easy to pick up because they're going to be at Pietra's. So please do that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver.
Nothing. I'm getting super excited for Carnation Festival.
Okay. Mr. Pond.
Can't follow that.
Okay. Ms. Hoppy.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I want to, as always, thank all of our citizens who came to speak tonight. This is where your voice can be heard. I want to thank the NRS committee members and staff and the consultants we had, and most importantly, the participants who participated in the process, because that validates and that strengthens the information that we get. And I would also like to remind everybody that we have the Carnation Festival coming up from August the 9th to the 11th. We've got a great parade kicking off on Saturday morning on the 10th. A lot of great floats and a lot of things happening in our city. So thank you all for being here tonight. With that, we will stand adjourned.